Ireland, what springs to mind when we talk about the men in green?
I think the prevailing narrative around Ireland, outside Ireland at the moment, is whether or not they are a great team on the wane, and whether or not they need a reboot, a refresh. There are some lads in there, the Peter O'Mahnys, the Cian Healeys, who've been around for years and years and years, and have a zillion caps. And there is, of course, the secondary narrative around Ireland, or perhaps the primary narrative, is who's going to play 10 for Ireland. And you've got Frawley, you've got Crowley, you've got Prendergast. I don't subscribe to the theory that, I think while you need a first choice guy, I think that's reasonable to accept. I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that you need to pick somebody to play fly half for Ireland and for them to play 79 minutes a week for the next 10 years like Johnny Sexton did. I don't. That's a nice idea, but if you have more than one guy that can do a job, and if they're slightly different players, both of them or all three of them, I think it can be a little bit, even at test level, horses for courses. Teams like New Zealand, teams like South Africa particularly recently, have shown us that it doesn't always have to be the same guy playing 80 minutes every week. And to that end, do you think, do you think one guy has to be picked and play 79 minutes every week for the next 10 years, a bit like Johnny Sexton did? Or do you think actually we can be a bit more horses for courses these days and that can work?
Yeah, I think time will tell a little bit. We've obviously got 3 quality 10s in the environment. So you look at their age profiles, they're all pretty young, relatively new to the international scene. Obviously, Jack Crowley's been around a little bit longer, but the competition I mentioned, which you want in the squad, is going to be great and bring the best out in those 3 guys. Like you say as well, it might be a case of one player plays against a certain opposition due to his strengths and another plays another. So I think it's going to be an ongoing battle, and yeah, one I'm excited to follow.
If you were Si used to be, there is youthful promise coming through. We've mentioned Prendergast, but there's also Gus McCarthy at hooker, Cormac Itoje. There are some brilliant youngsters in and around this squad. Is England in round 1 the game where you give them a crack?
No.
That was an easy answer.
Maybe. Pick the best guys. It's easy. I think what a lot of supporters want is to just pick on form. And you can't just pick on form, I don't think, because you'd have a different team every week, So, if Sam Prendergast has a great game one week, not a great game the next week, you don't drop him. That's not how it works. He's perhaps not the best example, but there are guys in there. So if Andrew Porter has a couple of mediocre games for Leinster, you're going to leave him out? No chance, mate. There's too much credit in the bank.
They have been fickle with their fly halves, though, because we all thought Jack Crowley was the best thing since sliced bread by the end of the last 6 Nations. Kieran Frawley was the man in South Africa over the summer. Sam Prendergast gets the keys in November and hasn't looked back since, and he is now Leinster's guy. So there has been some chopping and changing. There is a willingness to park development projects and then try someone else.
There is, but I wonder if at fly half in particular, because of who stepped away, the legend who stepped away, the leader who's gone, I wonder if they are particularly keen at fly half to get somebody in position so that by the time the next Rugby World Cup rolls around, there's a good number of caps there and there's a lot of cohesion between 9, 10, 12, 13, whatever combinations they want to play. I wonder if they feel a particular hurry. Also, if you talk about the older guys in the squad, the O'Mahnys, the Healeys, those guys, it's not their fault they're getting picked. So someone younger underneath them needs to come and knock them out the team. And if they ain't doing it, they ain't doing it. So he's right to pick them.
You've mentioned the consistency of your selections squad-wise, and there are plenty of familiar faces, but also some thrilling young talents. What is the message to the like of a Gus McCarthy or Cormac Itoje when it comes to not being afraid to challenge legends of Irish rugby for their jerseys?
Yeah, I guess those guys coming in the autumn, and they came in and they were definitely encouraged to be themselves and just not just fit in, but like show up and as we saw with those guys and Sam as well, Izzy, Gus, Sam, they all added value to the group, and I guess that in November is a little bit less pressure, I think, because there's not anything up for grabs, there's no silverware to win, so Six Nations comes at a little bit more pressure. It's a little bit more intense in terms of media sort of speculation and in sort of we're under the microscope a little bit more than in November. But I think that's what players like that will thrive on. And that's what we want to encourage as well, is that they understand the pressures, but they also can be themselves and they can go out and perform on the back of it.
We've mentioned his name a couple of times now, Si Easterby, interim head coach while Andy Farrell is off on his Lions sabbatical. Is there any risk that the players, knowing that the head honcho is away for a little bit, might just lose 1% or 2% of intensity? Have you ever had a situation like that?
It's like when you get a supply teacher, isn't it?
Exactly.
Supply teacher, I'm doing any homework.
Yeah.
Not doing it. They never make us do any homework. Did you have any homework to hand in, lads? Nope, didn't have any.
Not
Didn't have any. No, I don't think so. Also, I don't think you get to be the #1 team in the world, as Ireland did, and be one of the best teams in the world for such a period of time now without having a group of players who are really, really driven. I'm sure Andy Farrell, I know from personal experience that when Andy Farrell speaks, it's a powerful setup and he's worth listening to, and he says great stuff and he's very good at motivating a team. But actually, do they need Andy Farrell's team talks over Simon Easterby's or over someone else's? I think this is with a bit of guidance, this is a player group with a lot of experience, except at fly half, who has, driven themselves to being the best side in the world. So I wouldn't predict any sort of drop off at all. Certainly if I was a player in that environment, you wouldn't accept any drop off.
Let's talk about England. It's been a tough 12 months for Steve Borthwick and his team. They're under a lot of heat, and it seems as though one of their solutions to their inability to finish off fixtures and clinch results is to change the captaincy. What did you make of the news that Maro would be replacing Jamie?
Brutal on Jamie, right? Because top player, sort of widely known. This isn't the point of our job, is to say that someone's a good bloke. That's irrelevant. But
it's relevant.
It's sort of relevant here in that he's widely sort of loved and respected. So that isn't a reason to keep someone on as captain because they're a good bloke, but you just feel a bit more sorry for them actually when you know they're nice. That's part of it, I think, is the human side to it too. I think what it tells us is that Jamie is not the automatic first choice at hooker for Steve Borthwick. He may well still be first choice, but it's not automatic in Borthwick's mind. And despite what some people might have said in the autumn about it not mattering, I think he likely wants a captain on the field at the end of the game.
Yeah.
His captain on the field, and so doesn't want to swap captaincy with 25 minutes to go. So because then if you think about a captain building up a line of communication with a referee, for example, that can take time to build. It can take time to culture that. And I think starting fresh with 20 minutes to go, the real pressure minutes, I think you want to go into the last quarter with some sort of rapport with the referee. Maybe that's it.
Maro Itoje is England's new captain. I think it's pretty obvious from the outside why he's going to be such an outstanding leader, what quality has attracted you to him. But in your own words, Steve, why is he the man for this Six Nations?
Well, I think he's the right man to captain England at this stage now. There's always different dimensions to making a decision like that. But fundamentally, I think he is a great player, a world-class player. Has been for so many seasons and continues to get better. I think there's more growth in his game. And when you see your captain striving like that to improve and be better and have such demanding standards, that's someone else that sets an example through the whole squad. I think he thinks deeply about the game, thinks deeply about his preparation, but also plays the game in a confrontational, competitive manner, and has a really good balance between that thought process and that fierce competitiveness.
Do you think clarity of thought, if we could go back in time and pipette it into England's performances over the autumn, would have resulted in a very different complexion to their results? Because we keep hearing we're not far off from coaches, from individuals within the camp, and there's a lot of reasons to believe that. Was a missing ingredient clarity of thought?
I do buy into the theory that England are not far off, actually. But if you're not far off against Ireland, then France, then Scotland, you'll lose all three. Clarity of thought, yes, is something that you can always be improved, but then they lost to one of the greatest teams in history by 9 points. Really a missed tackle between Slade and Earl on Deolandi. If that doesn't happen, which it never really does any other day, maybe that game's different. I think the Boks still win it, but it's tight. absolutely should have won the first one against New Zealand, and you bring George Ford on, and it's easy. You know, Phil Vickery, the England legend, he said to me after the game, he said, "We've all got a degree in hindsight, mate." And I said, "You're right. When Marcus Smith came off, a lot of people were thinking, why is he coming off?" And it's a fair question. But if the guy you're putting on is a George Ford or a Andre Pollard, if you're South African, you're pretty confident they're going to close it.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. I think the key element for me is it doesn't matter whether you've got the players to play a certain way, because what you've got to do is get the best players you think can get close to where you want to be and develop them and make them better and bring the best out in them. And that is partly who you play in certain positions, like 10, who England play. So it's also that, but surely getting the best out of a group of players is the very definition of coaching, isn't it? That's what it is.
Is there something to be said then, given that Alex Mitchell will surely go back straight in as the number one in the pecking order for scrum half, for just cutting and pasting the Northampton Saints backline with an Ollie Lawrence, with a Freddie Stewart, and sending that lot off to the Aviva?
Yeah.
Would that work?
There's a case for it, but I always think it's like a heavyweight championship of the world boxing match. It's like any world title boxing match. There's a champion and a challenger. And Marcus Smith has the England 10 shirt, and if someone wants it, they've got to knock him out of it. I don't think you just divvy it up and give it around. But I do think, as I think with Ireland, there is potential for more than one guy to play fly half for England. There is potential in this Six Nations to pick one or two fixtures where perhaps Finn Smith does start and Marcus Smith's on the bench, or he's covering fullback, or George Ford comes into the mix, because let's not sleep on George Ford. You know, 98 test England fly half, knows his onions by now, right? Yes. So knows what he's doing. He might have missed a drop goal, but let's not forget all the drop goals he slotted against Argentina in the World Cup. He's generally done pretty well for England. So fascinating conundrum at 10. Marcus Smith would be the guy I would pick. Finn Smith, not far off at all.
If I were a Northampton Saints fan, I would be saying, Steve, just stick the Saints backline in. You've got Finn Smith in red hot form. You've got some scintillating pace out wide, and they play that sort of rugby, ball in hand. What would be your counter to that? Who else do you like amongst your backline options, and why do you think it's not as simple as that?
I think the players you mentioned are brilliant players, and I think that we've got a real good blend of players coming through in this. You see, I talk about the development, the amount of pace we have on the edge of the field in the back three, which I think is exciting to see from our perspective. I think you see competition in the back row with world-class players there, players who just never seem to stop running, and that's the nature of what we're trying to develop within this team.